I'll turn that on. Okay. So today we're beginning our 2-month celebration of our 90th anniversary for the AAUW-Vancouver branch. As some of you already know, AAUW-Vancouver was founded on November 13th. I think it's the 14th, 1931. It is November 14th. And so happy anniversary to everybody. And today it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, my good friend, Tracy Reilly Kelly. She's been making presentations all year on topics related to women's history, including a program she did for us in October of last year on the suffrage movement. Today, she's going to look back over the past 100 years, and we'll learn about some of the valiant women who ran for and held office in Clark County, how they moved into business, and how clubs, including AAUW, became all the thing. She is also excited to share some of what she has learned by delving into our AAUW archives. Reilly Kelly was a health educator for Southwest Washington Health District's HIV/AIDS program in 1988. She began teaching health at Clark College in 1991 and also taught in the chemical dependency and business and industry training departments. She taught health, human sexuality, and women's health and women's studies at Clark College for 12 years and at Portland State University for 4 years, and received the Outstanding Adjunct Faculty for Health and for Women's Studies. She became the program manager of the Senior Citizen Program, Mature Learning at Clark in 1998. In 2008, our speaker was honored as a Woman of Achievement by the YWCA of Clark County and Clark College. In 2009, she became the program manager of the Cooking and Wine School at Clark's Columbia Tech Center campus, where she enjoys creating curricula with an emphasis on nutrient-dense foods. In 2014, she became the program developer for community education. I really don't know how, Tracy, did I get that right?
We can cut this off.
I'm done. I just don't know how Tracy finds all the time to do what she does and still come talk to us. So, and I know this is a very little of what she actually does. So Tracy, we're really excited to hear what you have to share with us today. Take it away.
Well, hi, everyone. And I am here actually, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, and I normally don't have the time to go to this meeting, but I formerly was a member of the AAUW and share all of its highest ideals with you. And I'm just so excited about this presentation. The thing that I want to tell you about the presentation is when I first was going to speak, I had a lot of ideas, but I didn't think I was going to have inside information about AAUW. Well, guess what? You have archives. I think many of you know that you have archives. I'd like everybody also to hit your mute button, and let's just have me be the only speaker. But anyway, what I want to tell you is the stuff that I have found in your archives, and how I love to get in the weeds. I love to go, let me share, I'm going to share my screen. I love to get just as deep as I can into the weeds and into, let me just do it. So everyone, I believe, sees my screen. And so I want to talk to you. Now, the American Association of University Women is having a 100th anniversary this year. And I think you know that your branch is 90 years, and we are certainly going to get to that. But just for a quick little bit of context here, the American College Association was formed in 1881, and the two great women in this were Marion Talbot and Ellen Swallow. And so the ACAA was getting an emphasis on college women. And then in 1921, the Southern Association of College Women merged with the ACA and formed the AAUW. Here they are. these are the two founders, and don't you just love it? And of course, at the time, being a university woman was very, very important because there were many women who had a great deal of education because they could get into education, but they could not get into work, into careers. So let's just give a really quick context, because I'm going to give you some women's history of our women, our local women. So let's get an idea about who we were in Washington, right? So we first had the vote in 1883. It was taken away, but we could vote for national candidates in 1910, not 1920, because we had state suffrage. And then in 1920, we were the 35th state. So it's important to know that hold that, 1910. The other thing, it's a year later, just to mention, what a year for women's studies, right? Because not only did COVID cancel many things, but also there's a much greater awareness of systemic racism and the privilege of suffragists. And we would see this in AAUW as well. Not only do we have an area where you're going to see a really lot of privileged white women who are going to go across my screen, but we have, let's have everybody go ahead and mute themselves. You've got a little mute button on the lower left-hand corner. Hey, well, answer the phone, whoever you are, and then try to see if you can turn the mute button on. And then anyway, I'm gonna go forward. Boy, I hope whoever you are, you could answer your phone. Okay. So as the 20th century dawns, we have something called the new woman, right? And this is a woman who, for the very first time, is able to get out, do things. So not only is she a university woman, but she's going camping, and she's doing all sorts of different kinds of things than women were ever allowed to do before. And so here in Clark County, our women are moving their inspiration into enterprise, right? So the nation is moving forward with a zeal for social reform. Women are going into the workplace, and the first thing that they are doing, again, they are attending universities, but it's much, much harder to actually get work. So we have a lot of very educated women around, and they are going to figure out ways to channel the thinking that they are going to do, this more complex future. And I also want to mention that as I talk to you about clubs, there's a lot of back and forth between AAUW and the Athenaeum Club. And when I was doing research, I have like the greatest story about the Athenaeum Club, but I don't have time to tell you it. But I'm going to also sort of make a plug that I have too much information, and you just may need to have me back to finish it up. So this new generation of women is getting out there, and the thing that we are doing is forming clubs. And I have to tell you that when women started forming clubs in the 20th century, we can really relate to this. I'm really one of these women. I believe that you are also, right? And clubs of, by the way, every society and form. So we're going to talk about women who are looking for intellectualism, but also there are women bicyclists, there are women mountain climbers, there are women who are doing all kinds of things in meaningful ways. Vancouver then forms their branch of AAW in 1931 at the outset of the Depression. And so, I was saying to you that I have all of this archival stuff that I'm sharing. And it's not that I'm thinking that you are going to read these articles and everything, but as the women in our town are finding out about the AAUW, they're beginning to form study groups and inviting speakers to illuminate issues of national and international affairs. And I would love nothing else than to have a catalog for you of the amazing number of programs. So as you think about the kind of programs that you already know, your archives are absolutely remarkable, talking about the depth of the kind of things that women were learning. So I just absolutely love this particular slide here. So there's a lot going on here. And what is on the left-hand side, but by the way, this is these are the very first members. These are the charter members. And this is them either signing in themselves at the first meeting, or we can see that it looks like there's a secretary, because there are also there's also handwriting. And notice that even though we've got Alice Haveray Leach here in Hazel Thimple, this is because they are not married, because as soon as you become married, you have to you have to take your husband's name. So for example, I don't really know who Mrs. E.N. Blythe, what her real name is. Obviously everybody called her that. So this is just, the other thing I want to mention is we've got a 1957 article over here on the left-hand side. And I want to mention that I do archival work also at League of Women Voters. And the Columbian used to cover interesting programs at the League of Women Voters, and especially at AAUW. And they certainly should have, because I have to tell you, the caliber of the programs were absolutely extraordinary, right? So, but they don't, they don't do this kind of coverage anymore. And I think that that's really too bad, because you really get a lot and see what's going on with the culture in the area. And so here's one of the celebrations, just like you're having here today. It was the next month, and it was at Royal Oaks. This was the 25th anniversary, the article here, where we are honoring Mrs. E.N. Blythe, the first president in 1931. And each branch meeting then at the very beginning included musical selections, soloist ensembles, vocal and instrumental, and there were large rotating teams of ladies who always gave a delightful tea. And then here they are. These are the first members. Now, Elizabeth Sterling was the AAUW founder, and in any catalog of notable Clark County women, Elizabeth Sterling is going to be front and center. She arrived with her husband and stepson in 1900. She had been in New Jersey and had been a principal in New Jersey, graduating from the state normal school. Mentioned to everybody, I think most of you know, but just in case you don't, a normal school is a teaching school. And she earned her BA from the UW in 1906. So she went up there and figured that out. And then also, she taught at the Central and Franklin schools, but she was elected the first Clark County school superintendent in 1911. So when women got the vote in 1910, that was the very first election that they could run for. And so she is the first woman elected to this post and any post in after suffrage. She served until 1916. And then she also ran, she also became the deputy county clerk of Vancouver. So what was happening here in the 1930s? Mrs. Gordon Powers, who by the way is Hilma Powers, and I'm going to give you a tribute of her. Here's just some of the kind of arcana that I found in your archives. This is in 1938. Hilma Powers was a delegate to the state convention in Spokane. Just another article here about some of the interesting things that were going on in AAUW. And if you did not have your celebrations at Royal Oaks, you had it out at Covington House. And for those of you who don't remember this, Covington House was one of the original settlings in Vancouver, and it was a kind of a log cabin event location up Main Street at about 45th. This is another, this woman, Helen Flower Jones. I just have to tell you, she, in all of the newsletters throughout the 30s, Helen is contributing poetry. Graduate of Wellesley. Again, just the kind of woman that we can relate to. And when I look through these articles, what I really love, and some of you maybe find some of your family members in these, and we see a lot of people, you know, Mrs. Paul Geiser, we see movers and shakers. I see a lot of people from Clark College, Mrs. Baird, there's Baird Hall, there's Geiser Hall. Lot of things going for these women. Now, the scholarships were the intent immediately early on. And here's a kind of a neat little piece, one of your people in your archives, a tally for this. And so the bridge would be not only really a big deal and this thing that women really like to do together. And you would, so by the way, different women would have it in their homes, and they would really show off how beautiful their homes were, because this is all described in people who had minutes, and then getting the most dollars. So, and it seems to me that Bridge has stayed as a significant fundraising effort for many decades. And when you look at this, all the different groups through AAW, through all of the years, book groups and bridge groups are the most dominant activity. All right, we're going to get to 1940. That's good, since we've got a lot of decades. You know, these are just also some kind of really cool articles about the kind of things that are going on. First of all, look, this is 1940. And we see on the right that the study group is discussing propaganda. And think about how interesting this all is, because we're not at war yet, right? It's peacetime in the United States in 1940. And then on the other side, imagine a time that Timberline Lodge really had not exactly been built, right? And on the other side, in January of 1940, we hear about the work being done to create Timberline Lodge. Now, in these World War II years, we were asked, I'm going to say we, okay, because it's just more comfortable to say we, the rally cry at the convention, right? Every activity of the branch should be tested for the significance in winning the war and maintaining foundations for post-war reconstruction. So AAUW was very involved in the war effort. And the thing that was really interesting and going on also in this women is that suddenly there are shipbuilder families everywhere, right? And there is diversity coming into Vancouver for the first time. And we are beginning to see people who have come from the South, who have come from different areas. You know, one of the interesting things is how many of those people stayed. More of the ship, more effort, more Black people found. By the way, here's a little bit of Arcana. Apparently, Vancouver, and I'm not saying Vancouver was like broadsided or anything like that, but Vancouver was a little less racist than Portland. And so some of the families thought that they might stay here. But ultimately, it really was a privileged and white area here. And it's been a very hard, long hold for diversity to get going. But what is very clear is that the women in AAUW are throwing themselves into the war effort, are doing Red Cross work, working at the veterans hospitals, learning about a lot. There's a lot of our articles and things on, you know, like not eating meat, eating more vegetarian things, ways to conserve at home, clever kind of things so that you don't buy so much. So during the war, there's really a big thing of do well with what you have. And also an awareness of childcare for the first time, because women were looking to be in the war effort. And then a very exciting thing happened, which was that the state convention was held for the first time in 1948. Now, here's just a fun little piece of Arcana, right? So if you're celebrating, you know, today, and so here 10 years in review, and this seemed to be very common, by the way. There are little pieces that are in review, and people are talking about the first things that they are doing. And here are all of the founders, right? And then there is tomorrow. So the post-war programs then began changing and reflecting some of the newer concerns. I have a little image here of a 40s daycare center. This is really absolutely new. Even the kindergarten movement is new in the 40s. And AAUW is very, very interested in education, in nursery schools, early childhood education. You see this very, very strongly. Now, also, there's a lot of great programs on things like interracial relations, on atomic energy, right? These kind of themes that you're going to see going throughout our lifetimes are really happening here. It's kind of interesting. AAUW resumed giving a scholarship to a Clark College student, not quite sure when. So here's kind of an interesting thing. The budget in 1945 is 283, and in 1949 is 1,040. Dues are up, and a lot of good members. In fact, here are people meeting, and there are 100 women on the guest day, because also during World War II, keeping culture alive, it's really interesting. This is a really lovely program about an interior decorator who's talking to you about why you don't need to buy things, why you can do a wonderful interior decoration in order to just redecorate your own home and things that you might use. Any questions or comments up to this point? Here they are. So here are those many more members. And notice again that women are listed often by their husbands' names. It's kind of interesting because we've got Mrs. Carolyn McCready. So we've got some women who say, no, I'm going to be by my own name. But for the most part, they take their husband's name. So I was going to talk to you about notable women. I have way too much to do. I don't know how I'm going to do it, so I'll probably have to stop at some point. But I want to mention to you that Julia Butler Hansen is the first. So when we look at who some of the first women who represented us, our first U.S. congressional representative, who is a woman, was Julia Butler Hansen. She's out from Kathlamet. She was really deeply interested in environmental law, and she is big on the Alaska pipeline. I mean, this woman was so dynamic. You just a very, very extraordinary woman, who could be in with the men. She was discriminated against all of the time, but she had fantastic ways of figuring out how to enter that boys' club that she wasn't invited to. Other very, very important early woman for Vancouver is Representative Ella Wintler, Miss Ella Wintler, who was an educator. I didn't see her on your chart. You know, I was looking to see whether I saw her as a member. It really, really surprised me that she was not a member of AAUW. It looks like she wasn't, but she was the first State House of Representatives who was a woman in the 17th district. And then the 49th district was formed in 1959. And that was when she moved over there. Someone who was in the AAUW and an incredibly important person to Vancouver, a librarian's librarian. Take your tip of the hat to Eva Santee. In 1940, she was working in the Carnegie Library. Do you know where that is? That's where the Historical Museum is. She was the first person who began bookmobiles, and she began community forums in World War II. And one of the things very, very obvious is that the community forums that she's doing are based on the study things in AAUW and what she is taking from there. But every moment she lobbied for the library, and she was involved in the making of the new library in 1963. So in the 50s, there is a really lot of growth going on in AAUW. And in this year, in fact, there are 35 women on the board alone, right? And there are 4 officers, study group chairs, appointed positions. So people are very, very big at this. And, you know, we know about that if we think about some of the things that were going on in the 50s that led to the women's movement. We see that our women didn't want to stay at home with the kids and really wanted to do interesting things. Membership peaks at 292 in 1958. And look at this. It turns out that AAUW has an approved list of colleges. I don't know if you still do or not, but you did then. Hilma Powers. Now, one of the great things when you see Hilma Powers is she's modeling Mamie Eisenhower's hat. Hilma Powers is really also incredibly important to Vancouver. She's our first city councilwoman. And she's not only one of the AAUW charter members. We really, again, if you want to look at who exemplifies what the spirit is of this highly educated group wanting to do a lot of action, here she is. So not only is she past president, look at that in 1937. She's also, of course, of the Athenaeum Club, which is the literary society that I was referring to, longtime member of the YWCA. Yeah, she is a university woman. Hilma Johnson Powers, she had attended Central School in Vancouver, graduated from the UW Phi Beta Kappa. Look at this, assisted with graduate work at Harvard and U of O. And she was honored with a fellowship gift of 500 in her name to the state association. So when we're looking at who are the most important women of the century, Hilma Johnson Powers. The scholarships are going and going and going. And again, isn't this a nicer thing? And wouldn't we like to see this? Here's a profile of the high school woman that AAUW gave a scholarship to. And it was also really fun to me because in mature learning, I met Miss Louise McKay many decades later, and she was involved in AAUW, wasn't she? And again, notice a dance at Royal Oaks. I was mentioning it's always Royal Oaks. So here are some women. And also I want to tell you, I don't know what you're wearing. I look pretty nice on top, but I've got sweats on below. Women were, you know, we dressed up really nicely in order to go, because this is an AAUW study group. And the study groups over the years had, you know, study groups are not all that different in 2021. We see that like these world affairs and international affairs, I bet those are in kind of the great decisions group. Mahjong instead of bridge. Ladies, I have to tell you, there's so much bridge in your past. If any of you are bridge players, I think you really need to start a bridge group. And of course, child study being something really big. And I think it's kind of interesting because we're going back to maybe getting paid for pre-K. Wouldn't that be good? Here's just a little bit of Arcana. I got to get going because I've got too much. I kind of like this just to show you, for some of you who would like to go through your archives and see what's in there, this is just a really great example. Look at, these are all of the things that were budgeted, adjusted, and a balance, right? And so in that year, 641, but ending with a balance of 668. So doing a lot of good work. Just another piece of Arcana. All right, so in the 60s, I haven't gotten very far. I got to really get going in the next 5 minutes. Nationally, a lot of things were going on in terms of protest. If we look and think about protest in Vancouver, we think about Val Joshua, one of the greatest heroes, led NAACP for decades, super involved in YWCA, and was one of those individuals who came in the shipyards and then did work on racial justice. In the 60s, themes were really, really international. Now, look, this is kind of an interesting thing. Membership declined from 215 to 147. There were some new program structures adopted. I want to mention this is also something that happened at League of Women Voters. And you see this decline in membership in the 60s and 70s. And you know what one of the reasons is women are going to work. So a lot of the women who were really pouring themselves out into these clubs are now working, and they have kids and everything. In the 60s, women were really, really deeply into professionalism. And we see the kind of branch meetings, and there was a really, really big project in the 60s of rewriting Washington state constitution. Now in the 70s, what would you think it would be? I made a big guess before I went into your archives. I put this emblem of ERA on this slide because of course we knew that AAUW would be so. And AAUW were pivotal in Title IX's creation and passage. It was introduced and sponsored by AAUW member Representative Edith Green. So remember, Title IX is so important for women, right? It just does the myriad number of things that Title IX did. I think a lot of times we hear about it because it's when women became athletes, right? When they first would be able to become athletes. But I think it's also important to realize that this is about every single aspect of discrimination against women on the basis of sex. And in 1970, we published Campus 1970, Where Do We Stand? Documenting widespread sexual discrimination against women at all levels of higher education. As a person involved in education, I have to tell you, there isn't some interesting statistics. Do you know that currently there are more women in universities and graduating than there are men? And in higher education, which is certainly not perfect. If I was doing better of this work in the 20th century, we would know that issues of sexual assault, of all sorts of things are brewing and going on in the 1970s, beginning to get an awareness of domestic violence. These are all things that AAUW would be moving towards, but also really important that we keep the focus on campuses. But the 1970s were just a great time for activism in AAUW. And here are a lot of really interesting things that were going on. And Dorothy Langsdorff was a really powerful member, and she did so many different things about advocacy and truthfulness. But I have to tell you, do you realize it was only in 1976 that we got the listing of both spouses' names in the telephone directory? It was a long campaign in order to do this. This was a really hard thing to get on. And then it finally caught fire, but it was a very strong thing in AAUW. Here's another first, Senator Shirley Galloway. She was the first senator in the 17th district, although most of the time she was a representative in the 49th. Another really, really important woman, our very first county commissioner, her name was Connie Carney. In the 80s, the Vancouver branch turns 50. And look at all of these fantastic things that are going on. And I'm going to just go flying through this because you're going to say, Tracy, end on time, but I don't know why you're flying through things. Let's also tip our hat to a conservative warrior. I don't care whether you believe in her politics or not. Can I tell you that Linda Smith probably was one of the finest politicians that we've ever seen in Washington State, and certainly the Army. She began to recruit people called Linda's Army. You know, she is the person involved in Initiative 601, but I have to tell you, she won the 3rd District U.S. House of Representatives on a write-in campaign. Right. And right now she serves as leader of this organization, Shared Hope International, preventing sex trafficking. An interesting little aside, the word sex trafficking, can we all think that throughout this history, it would have been called prostitution? And sex trafficking is an example of words that are far better usage, right, of context. Nan Hendrickson, also quite involved in AAUW, right? What an extraordinary woman. So you have to just get going on this because I have to finish. The 1990s, diversity and equality, right? And so this is when also we really begin doing things like less barriers to membership, letting men come in, really, again, looking at this, researching reports, shortchanging girls. And so it's in the 90s that you see AAUW moving also to realizing that supporting high school women is something very, very important to do in order to move them through. And also notice the Legal Advocacy Fund to support lawsuits by women, faculty, and students. Very, very exciting times in the 90s. Right? Who could be greater than Representative Val Ogden, citizen of the world, extraordinary public servant. Can't talk again about a century of woman without first citizen Val Ogden. Who is our first woman senator? Patty Murray. Remember that? She was the mom in tennis shoes. And when did she start? 1988. And guess what? She won the Senate in 1992. See, women can do it. We can do it. We can do it. Now, boy, am I sharp shift in the 21st century. That will be something that we can do much more. Really, really getting interested in STEM-related careers, gaining women's rights and equity in the workplace. Senator Ann Cleveland, she was the first woman state senator in the 49th district. That's these people are the first. And then I couldn't possibly finish without talking about somebody really, really important to AAUW, and that would be Kitty Wash, your donor, who has donated so much to this branch. Active volunteer all of her life. By the way, Kitty loved bridge. Very, very committed to women's STEM education. Okay, I did it. And there's more. So it's an awful lot of fun, by the way. The other thing I want to mention is I want to give this, I can't send it because it's too loaded. I like to make interesting photos and stuff, but I'll get this on a thumb drive and get it to Pat so that we can get it in a place that any of you can see, you can use. May I mention that I would like to, in one sense, copyright this. I'd like you to attribute it to me, but also this is your gift and something that I think would be fun in your archives also, and anybody could use to present. Questions? Please ask me questions.
Tracy, this is Lorraine talking to you. I wanted to know, in all of the research that you did, what was the one thing that most surprised you about AAUW?
Well, this is not exactly a surprise, but the thing that enchanted me in a surprised way is the extraordinary programs through the years, right? You know, studying China in the 30s, right? Studying propaganda right before World War II. The caliber of these programs going through the years is nothing short of absolutely astonishing. So I guess that would be my best answer for that.
Thank you.
Others?
Yeah, this is Michelle. I found your analysis or summary of the membership numbers very interesting. And you know, everywhere we're in this dynamic of, you know, women working, women with children, raising children, and juggling so many things. And have you seen that as the main effect? Did you see that as the main effect in the demographics, you know, past the 60s? Or did you see other factors maybe at play?
I didn't. So one thing I'll tell you is, let me tell you one quick thing. Your archives only go, the actual archives of the scrapbooks, they actually only go to 1960. So there also were some pieces by one of your archivists who did a narrative that was really, really wonderful for all the years. But I'll tell you that it's merely women going to work that cuts down on membership. And the more that women, the more that women are working, the fewer, and especially if you think about it, let's look at AAUW. And, I'm a bit of an educational elitist. I fit really well with all of you. There just is in AAUW, and League of Women Voters is the same kind of thing. If you think about it, as we're getting sort of this drain of membership of women going into professional careers, they're really going into really good and high, there a lot of women are going into really, really interesting careers. And then, and are also doing a lot of different things. But of course, yes, childcare is exhausting for women and managing things. I mean, and this is something you also would see in AAUW continually talking about how much more support women need in order to have careers out of the home. Because we get it. It's kind of hard because I went through it so fast, isn't it? It's hard to kind of stop and think about any one thing. But
so Tracy, you mentioned that the archives go up to the 60s online, and so for everybody, the archives are being gradually digitalized by WSU Vancouver, which is where our archive is, as most of you know. And so right now, for example, they have 2 scrapbooks taken apart that they're digitalizing. Tracy has actually offered, if there's anybody who wants to kind of have a little tutorial on how to access and use our archives, she's willing to do that for us at another time. And so if you're interested in that, let me know. Okay. I think
we could
be very interesting.
We could just do a little session and visit. And then there's certain ways, I have to tell you, there are certain ways to find information. I use a lot of archives through the League of Women Voters also. So I have tips, I have ideas about how to do it. Although you can't avoid loving it. I invite anybody to do it. It's enchanting to walk in, you more feel like you're feeling those women and then realizing they're just so much like us.
Other questions? Comments?
I have one comment on World War II. The shipyards and areas that employed a lot of women was the start of organized childcare. I worked for the Army in the childcare field, but they were the impetus for setting up quality childcare. And recently there was a program about childcare on TV, but it talked about using the military model if the government finally gets around to subsidizing some of the early childhood programs. Just thought I'd mention it.
Well, and over where in Delta Park, where there was, I think it was called Fruit and Flower or something like that. And they had 3 shifts. So women were working, all hours too. And they actually had daycare that had entire shift. You could have any time of day, you could have childcare.
Tracy, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I come from the Midwest, been here for 20 years in the Great Northwest, but I heard you talk about the YWCA, but now in the 50s, women were allowed in the YMCA. And I happen to be privileged to be able to teach girls how to swim at the YMCA in the 50s. Did that happen here in Vancouver?
I'm not sure, although I'll say something humorous and a little bit acerbic, right? A little bit cynical, which is that the pools were at the YMCA's, right? And the women didn't have pools at our facilities.
Well, the men swam with nothing on. So it was difficult for me to get my class going because when I came to the YMCA in Madison, Wisconsin, we had to call down women coming into the pool because they didn't have clothes, or they probably wore a jockstrap. I don't know. I didn't see them, but this was a big event in Madison to allow women to be at the YMCA. I'm assuming you had a YMCA here. I don't know. I go there now.
Yes,
I don't know how old it is.
Yeah, we had a YMCA. The YWCA was formed in formally in 1920, right like the same as with suffrage. Well, I guess I got to get going, right? Are we need to I will also put my email in the chat for anyone who might want to contact me. And I'm also going to put a little thing in the chat about a class I'm going to teach next term, and I'll put some things in for later on.
Tracy, I have one more thing I think I'll bring up. I was intrigued by the term you used in your presentation about approved colleges. It sounded like not every college educated woman could get in, like you had to maybe present your diploma or your credentials in some way. I don't know how much more, but it made me think about right now in our national agenda, we have been voting for the last few years about whether to allow women into this organization that do not have a college degree. And I'm not, maybe Pat Wozniak can bring us up to date on where that stands, but we have voted on it 2 or 3 times and it hasn't passed yet. But the idea is that we're somewhat discriminatory by requiring a college degree. So I think that approved colleges idea back in, I forget what era that was that you brought it up in, was pretty interesting.
I think it was in the 40s. And yeah, it seems really clear that I didn't see the list of what it is. Although I'll also say, this organization caters to a certain kind of woman. It seems really clear. So that doesn't mean that you have to have a degree to be interested in these programs. But the affiliation seems to be really important historically. So I would give props to keeping it as university women and possibly opening up certain, workshops or programs for the community. That's what it looks to me like was like, so Eva Santee and Hilma Powers and some of those people, you know what they were doing? They were taking what they had at AAUW and they were also contacting some of those same people and having community forums. And I think that Eva Santee started the forum at the library. Seems very, very clear she took the AAUW model. She was president at the time, so of course she did. So.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, well, thank you, Tracy. I learned a lot. I know that, some of the members who've been here, most of the members have been here longer than I have, and they've heard a lot of this history and much of it before, but I haven't. So I really found it fascinating, and I'm sure that there were lots of tidbits that people didn't know about. And I really liked seeing the politicians and how that evolved. It's really a pretty recent tenure that's happened. And we can always invite you back to come talk to us again about our history. If you probably have that other presentation all ready to go, right?
I'll want to as soon as the other archives open up.
Right. Oh, and as far as the archives, so one of the things is too that there, I don't remember the time frame, but there is something in the contract that they won't ever have it completely up to date because they want to leave some time so that the people who were involved in the stuff are maybe not around any longer. I don't know the exact language for that, but They will never have it completely up to date. They're going to lag purposely. So, okay, thank you so much.